Well, I want to welcome everybody to our Alert Communications webinar on outsourcing legal intake for success. To give you a little background on Alert Communications, we are a dedicated legal-only call center that does legal calls, virtual reception. We actually do retainers as well and sign clients up, and we have a lot of sophisticated services that we'll cover today as well about how to actually outsource legal intake for success. We have been in business since 1965. We are a 24/7 service, and we are also bilingual, so we can handle both English and Spanish for intake. So we're going to get going now since everybody else is here, and I'm going to give it just a couple more seconds here, and then we'll get going. I also want to bring up too, there is a Zoom, a group chat, and if you have any questions on there, then you can actually respond to there. So you can just put those in there. I'll respond to those as we either go on the slide or at the end of the conference. All right, so here we go. So first of all, let's just talk about outsourcing legal intake for success. It does seem to be one of the issues that we deal with on a regular basis with law firms is how do they make sure they don't miss any of the leads that are generated for them by legal marketing, or they're either externally or internally. So let's talk about how we can actually do this. I think the first thing to talk about is just to ground the conversation is the general business strategy that does exist. And that general business strategy that exists, it doesn't matter if it's Ford or Pepsi or somebody else, is you have the company or the product in the business world. They have a whole marketing team that's generating interest in their product, and they have a sales team that's converting that interest into business for the company. And that really basically, when all three of those fronts are clicking on all cylinders, they are actually a growing and thriving business. In the legal world, it's a little different. The law firm basically is the product. They are the company. Effective marketing is so critical because the cost of marketing to compete in each location. And then it's critical to talk about outsourcing and optimizing intake, as well as contract services, and being able to convert these people right away due to the new impatience of really clients that are calling in that are looking for help right away. And a lot of these call after hours, a lot of them call on weekends, and a lot of them expect a response within the first immediate as well as within the first couple of minutes to get back to them. So let's talk about how we can help on that strategy. The first thing is really evaluating your internal intake process within a law firm or for a law firm to see really what can be helped. And the critical starting point is really being open to all changes that cause improvements. And that means that you kind of have to take down all barriers and protective silos and have an open mind when you evaluate your intake process internally. So the question is, should you evaluate yourself? Meaning that, do you really even know why you're failing internally or if you're missing leads or not? And that's really a good question is to really start from is, do you know how many leads you are losing? And I've asked this question in huge conferences with 600 to 1,000 people sitting there, and nobody really can raise their hand on it. They can understand how many leads are coming in and what they do with those leads and maybe the conversion. But to know how many leads are being lost because they were put on hold or they weren't responding to quick enough or hung up because it didn't, there was no person to connect to, those are almost usually impossible for a law firm to measure. But it is something to take note of. This can be measured to create better efficiency. The other key is, what is the plan of the law firm to improve initial client experience and convert more clients? Those are really good questions, both of those questions to ask yourself. And then finally, is the current plan just to spend more on marketing? Meaning that regardless of the internal failures, let's just spend more way through it and get to where we want to do growth-wise, not patching up the intake side. So let's talk a little about what the problem really is in the legal world landscape that exists today. Here's the common issue. Lost leads basically equal lost clients, which equal lost referrals, which equal lost revenue. So this is the common issue that people exist, and trying to plug this hole or make sure basically this is completely fixed so you don't lose leads, lose clients, and lose referrals and lose revenue. And that revenue is revenue that's reinvested back into marketing So basically, when the weak point is the intake, you really start to lose all that money to refund the marketing to drive more leads to your law firm. So let's talk about how super intake optimizes marketing. We mean super intake because that really means you're patching all the holes. That means you have 24/7 intake experts, and you have the proper bandwidth of people to make sure you're being able to talk to people right away, not having to put people on hold all the time. You also need excellent intake screening criteria. Let's spend a minute on this. We actually receive intakes all the time, and the criteria of these intakes that are used, where we actually do this for law firms and deal with that. And the one thing that's really critical is making sure that the questions are in the proper order, that you have the right questions on there. The intake is designed not just to gather information, but to build rapport with the client, to be able to share empathy with the client, to let the client talk, and actually let them become confident in your law firm. So really taking a look at that and actually receiving some coaching on intake screening and that criteria is actually critical as well. Also making sure that your 24/7 intake has managers over it. Now we're going to call it cells, and we understand that in the world of the legal, you really can't call intake cells because you really can't take an injured party or somebody calling for attorney services of any type and say, let you talk to our sales department. It just doesn't play right, doesn't sound right. However, it is. Converting any type of lead and interest into a client is sales. Calling it intake to externally is good to do that, but operating it like sales and making sure it's managed by people that operate it by sales that are like intake and sales managers combined is a better way to look at your intake department. And it also changes maybe how you hire people as well to actually operate or manage those departments. The common mistake is that unqualified and untrained staff are in intake and sales. This is what we see all the time. In fact, many people are put into this that aren't qualified within law firms, even really could be receptionists, could be even attorneys or paralegals that are too busy. But what you end up having basically is people that are multitasking, taking calls. So they're rushing to get prepared for maybe a trial. But what we do know is that multitasking lowers conversions. It lowers it for two reasons. One, response time is not adequate to be able to respond to the leads at the moment. And secondly, having the right mindset to take a call. The person that's actually taking a call, responding to a lead in the personal injury or workers' comp or disability markets or mass tort markets especially, but even in family law and other types of law practices, it's extremely critical that their mentality is the client is first. You don't sound rushed on the phone, you don't sound pressured on the phone, that you're listening to the client and they become number one on your plate. And it's really hard to do it if you're multitasking, doing too much at once. That means really that optimizing all facets of your intake really optimizes your marketing investment and to make sure that those dollars are spent wisely. And what becomes the bottom line when you do all this and you patch all the holes and you make this robust, the result is more clients for less marketing spend, which frees up more marketing, basically dollars now, to go back out to market and to get you more clients, and then the snowball just grows. So let's talk about the intake cost versus the marketing spend. So let's just take here, let's say the signed plaintiff cost. Well, usually 10 to 15% of that investment is spent on intake and all the intake systems that are required, and 85 to 90% are spent on marketing. That just goes to show you that if you have a great marketing and you have lousy intake, that what happens basically, or inadequate intake, what's going to happen is that you have to invest so much more of the pie back into marketing to get that new lead. Here's an example. Now I just put the cost per acquisition on here, and that's a high cost per acquisition, but let's just say that was $3,000. But in that situation, the marketing cost would be $2,600 to $2,750. Intake retainer cost would be $250 to $400. So if a lead is lost by bad intake, you're basically out to $2,700 marketing cost. So really making sure that the least expensive portion, which is intake, is shored up completely makes the most sense financially. So what does that mean? Intake is critical to control your marketing and campaign costs. So you have to ask yourself this question then: who are you marketing for? And the reason we're going to ask this question and go over this a couple times is that what law firms need to understand is that if they don't have all of their intake weaknesses shored up and strengthened, so they no longer have the weaknesses, That means they're investing in marketing firms. And if they don't respond to the leads quickly and with experts to make sure they retain that lead for the law firm that they actually is doing the advertising, that means technically they're actually losing leads to other law firms in their markets. They're actually advertising for other law firms. And once you kind of ring that bell, you realize how critical that is, that it makes absolutely no sense to market for other law firms, and then they end up with the referrals as well. So intake is so important to actually take care of that. Also, a wise use of capital. Digital web leads during peak hours can cost more than off hours, and often that is the case. So if you explore off-hour marketing with outsourced lead response, and we say outsource because many law firms basically are sending their people home at 5, 6, or 7 o'clock at night, but you can still market during those times and on weekends, even on holidays, as long as you have somebody outsourced to make sure you get those leads. And you can actually lower your marketing spend and actually capture more leads during other times and actually take advantage of other weaknesses that may exist by other law firms not actually taking advantage of that wise use of capital and in their investment of marketing and balancing that with outsourced intake. Let's talk about response time and how critical that is. Now, this was a study that was done a while back by InsideSales.com, but they actually did this for MIT. And this was just talking about a study about response time. So the one thing that's critical to know is that the odds of making contact decrease over 10 times in the first hour. So in the first hour, they reached out to a pool of leads, and they got 12,700 contacts. But 2 hours later, to the same pool of leads, they only reached 1,190. And that's because that interest had left and went out shopping to other people and would not respond any longer. So that shows how fast you have to be. So why is this important? Often when we're first doing an audit, we do these free audits for law firms all the time about their intake. But often when we do these audits for people, the first thing they tell us is that they get a web lead. I ask them, I go, if a web lead comes in, or a chat lead comes in, or a lead comes in at 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock at night, let's say on Friday night, and your doors are closed, what happens? And often they say, we respond the next day. And you can see if you do this, that technically that marketing is going probably to other law firms. They're actually losing those leads to someplace else. So that's how quick you have to respond. To sink that home even further, take a look at this. This is the same study. The odds of making contact decrease over 5 times in the first 5 minutes. So what does that mean? That means that you have to respond now. If it's chat, if it's a web lead, if it's any type of a call that comes in, if people leave a message for you and say, give me a call back, this is how much time you have. That's how fast it is. Now, this study was done in 2009. It's 10 years later. And even society now is even more impatient than this. So it's really critical to make sure you can respond. Now, we're going to talk about soon the systems that can be in place that are outsourced that actually can respond immediately to all leads. So we'll get to that soon. So we were talking about this earlier, but let's just take a look at this. An auto accident takes place, all right? Now what happens basically, the injured party basically, this is your law firm, your ad, your lead that drives them to you. So they come to your law firm, all right? Now it's your law firm to give them what they want, which means they are looking for a response. Let's say they call at 8 o'clock on Friday night, or they call at 2 p.m. on Saturday. If you do not respond, they're going to go to law firm number 2, law firm number 3, okay, until they find a solution and people get back to them. So the critical thing always to understand is that if you're going to market, you might as well make sure you respond to every single dollar, because marketing is such a lower cost than what the marketing, intake is such a lower cost than what the marketing campaigns cost to advertise for your firm. So what's the solution? Well, the solution is basically having intake strategies in place. Part of that is outsourcing. So let's talk about what really matters. What really matters is that you have instant response to all leads 24/7. Nothing's ever missed. There's no way for you to ever know if the case that comes in at 8 o'clock on Friday night is a case that's worth $3,000, if it's a case that creates $5,000, or it's a rainmaker case that's multi-million-dollar with a catastrophic injury, or some other type of case, or what that client is. There's just no way to know. So the only way to really solve that is make sure you miss nothing. So instant response to all leads 24/7. Secondly, once the client is with you, that you take care of them adequately with expert intake. You walk through the proper screening criteria, whatever it may be, and you basically make sure they know what's going to happen next. So let's talk about this. Now, what's also important that really matters that law firms need to consider is not just what the law firm wants, but what does the client want? Think about you. If you went out and got into a situation where you need an attorney, you need to talk to an attorney right now, what do you want? Well, what you want is for them to either pick up the phone, it doesn't matter what time of day or night it is, or respond to your lead, your web submission, or your chat right now, and get people on the phone with them so they know what to do next. By doing that, you stop the client shopping. What is that magic formula? That means that the 24/7, all inbound calls, these are English or Spanish, are answered in 3 rings or less. If you ever have a hold time, it must be under 15 seconds. That you have instant outbound response for texts, calls, and emails to all web leads going out, and you do that with varying times of days with multiple attempts. That improved web lead conversion from like 40% conversion to getting contact with a firm to a client to actually 80%. But that's the magic formula. Is it easy to do? No. Can some law firms do this during the day? Yes. Can they do it at nighttime and weekends? Rarely. To manage that makes no financial sense. It's better usually to outsource that. So this is key. The initial response must be with experts as well. So you can't just have anybody answering the phone, meaning you can't just use an answering service if you outsource that takes calls for plumbers and doctors, then to get on the phone and deal with somebody that's talking about a disability, a workers' comp case, a social security case, an injury case, a family law case. It just doesn't play because it's a different type of training. It's a more sophisticated answering and call service that does intake. So what does the potential client require? They require a superb initial experience to make sure they don't shop. So in other words, these clients are yours to lose. The marketing has drove the lead to you. Now it's up to you to make sure they never get missed. That means you have immediate live response at all times. Expertly trained intake specialists that build rapport and trust through active listening skills, and they're trained with empathy, psychology, call control, and legal terminology to build confidence in your law firm. That has to be there. And it has to be there after hours, it has to be there on the weekend, it has to always be there to set yourself apart, to make sure your marketing dollar stays home and they don't go to the next law firm because they have no confidence in you. And then finally, at the end of the call, whatever it may be, at the end of the contact, there are clear next steps for the client defined at the end of the intake and screening criteria that you do with them. That means you are either immediately going to text them over a retainer, if it's a contingency fee, to have them sign them up right away. Or you're going to set an appointment with them, or warm transfer to an attorney or somebody on your staff that's qualified to be able to handle this immediately and take it to the next step. But what does not work, and we know it does not work, after we do about 3 million intakes per year here, but what we know for sure doesn't work is say, we'll have somebody call you next week. That's when they are going to shop you for sure. So wrapping up those things, signing a retainer immediately by texting over your retainer over to them, an appointment, which could be an investigator going to them, an appointment in your office, an appointment for a call, whatever that does. If you lock down an appointment, they generally will not go to another law firm until they have that first appointment with you, or warm transfer to somebody that's adequate. That will give them the superb initial experience that they want, and that's what they were looking for when they called your law firm. The other thing you want to look at is intake bandwidth when you're outsourcing. You want to look at this internally too. What is your intake bandwidth? It equals more cases. There's a conversion myth that any type of lead basically comes in. If 70% of I convert 70% of my leads, that's awesome. But you can see the statements basically here. What really matters is that if 600 leads came in and we signed 140 out of the 200 qualified leads for a 70% conversion, another call center or even your law firm could say, we got 600 leads and we signed 70 out of 100, not 140 out of 200 for 70% conversions. Conversion is not the key. The key is making sure every single lead, every single person gets talked to immediately, and then you measure conversion. That you have to patch the front of that first to make sure bandwidth makes sense. Also, capturing all lead types. So your systems and people have to be set up in some sort of sophistication But it doesn't matter if the lead or it comes through a web lead from TV, radio, billboards, so if it comes through web forums, social media, chat, text, or emails for any online or digital leads or office calls, that all of these are handled properly. Every system of these is patched, and you take care and capture all of these at once. So part of that is lead tracking and chasing. These are really smart strategies that convert the most clients, and these are the things that we do here at Alert Communications to support, but you can also do internally if you could put systems in place actually during the hours. But that means that when web leads come in, you're going to follow up and chase web leads to initiate live call and complete the intake. So you're not going to just contact them once or do one reach out. You're going to do it in immediate response. You're also, if you ever send out retainers to people and to clients, that you're going to follow up and chase those until they're signed. You're not going to just send them out or mail out a retainer or send an investigator out or whatever you're going to do and not have a follow-up system in place, that you actually call them back, ask them if they have questions to get those back. What does that look like? Well, that planned follow-up system usually requires software. It's really difficult to do this on paper. It's basically impossible. So you're going to have scheduled times of follow-up, which means that either you've already scheduled with the client to follow up with them at a certain time, or you're going to follow up with them to open up the time. So if they called you at 3 o'clock on Thursday, you're now going to call them at nighttime at 6 o'clock and on the weekend, as well as, well, there's so many different clients we convert after hours, after work hours, and on the weekends, because that's when people are free and they're too busy at work to talk to you about cases. You also need to set up multiple reach attempts and then vary the times and methods, which means you're not always calling at the same time, which we just discussed, but mix it up. You're going to call them, you're going to text them, you're going to email them to try to get them to get back on the horn with you, basically to talk to you about their case or the contract that you've already sent to them. So our software does this. It actually tasks our people and rotates through a different system to do this. If you don't have a system like this in place in your office, you probably need this even during the day. But after hours, for sure, you want to make sure that you do this, and it'll actually convert a lot more for you. So stocking the shopping is really critical. Once you have the marketing work and you have a new client that you're actually talking to on the phone, giving them the clear next step is critical. So goal number one should always get an assigned retainer on the initial call. And we say on the initial call because of the fact that anytime you're dealing with a client in any form, when you have somebody that's interested in signing up with your law firm or retaining your law firm and becoming your client, when you break contact and hang up the phone, you actually lower your conversions. So at this point, is having a software system in place where you can talk about texting out the retainer to them, explain the retainer after you text it out to them or email it out to them to have them e-sign. That's the number one goal, is to sign them on the first call. If you cannot do that for any reason, you'd want to book an appointment for either a return call, for them to come into the office, or an in-home visit. That's step number two. And number three basically is warm transfer direct to an attorney. So it could be the fact that it goes to a certain attorney that handles that, but either one of those. Now, when the attorney gets the call, it would be their goal as well to book an appointment or actually get them signed back up or get it transferred over to somebody that can get them signed up as well to get that client. And the key here is that on the initial call, on the initial screening criteria, if they qualify as a client for you, that you convert them into a client to make sure they're not calling other law firms to compare you. And if you give them everything when they want, they will actually sign up with you. Now, converting on the initial contact is critical. So remember, number one goal is to e-sign all qualified leads immediately after intake, whenever that is possible. If that's not the strategy of your law firm, because you have to do a deeper dive or maybe your documents are too difficult, there are things you have to go over, or it's maybe a law that you have locally, then we could move on here. But remember, texting the retainer for e-sign on initial calls, it converts the highest amount of clients. I will tell you that the most clients we've ever signed for a single law firm was 24,000 clients in a class action over a 3-month period. So we've kind of got this down to a science, but even internally for you, every case matters. So texting retainers number that is really the best way. Email would be the third way actually to do that. It actually is better to text if possible, but email. Fourth way would be mailing out your retainer. And if that's not really possible, then you'd want to actually basically track, follow up, and chase, but you also maybe want to actually have an appointment with them, which is not in here, but this is how to convert initial contact in the very first call. So let's talk about all of the things we're trying to do here. I think it's really critical to understand it doesn't matter if the leads are calls or web contact forms or text leads or email leads or any older list you're going after or any type of list at all, or abandoned calls or any chats. The entire goal basically is to get them to digitally sign and convert them immediately. And if not, mail, and if not, have an appointment in the office. That's the most critical thing. All right, but if you can get this done and get a commitment here, that'll keep your marketing dollars in-house. The key is if you cannot do this internally, then you want to outsource for somebody that can do this for you to actually convert more clients and have more dollars and more revenue coming in to spend more on marketing to keep this cycle going. So other things, what are the additional capabilities of outsourcing to and partnering with a legal call center? What can they really do for you? And I think the most critical thing to look at here is all intakes are basically sent directly into your system. No leads ever lost with CRM and case management software integration. So one of the things we do for a lot of law firms, and we recommend highly, is that when the calls come in, once we do the intake, and even if we're doing outbound reaches and we do a qualifying intake, we immediately email out those intake and scripts out to the law firms, to multiple people within the law firm if they would like us to. Or we can text messages, or we can contact them anything they want. We can even warm transfer. But at the end of this, you want to make sure that all of those systems basically are from all sources, all calls, web forms, email, social media, chat, doesn't matter where it's coming from, are then exported and pushed intake data into your business automatically, which means into your systems. All your case management systems or your CRMs you have, that data is pushed straight in there. So you know every day you can come in and look into your system and know how many leads, even after hours, or all leads go into that system, so you know how to follow up and have a system that actually you can follow to make sure all leads get properly touched multiple times until they can become your client, if they're qualified. Also, the reason it's important is for campaign performance data. So for all these offline advertising sources, TV, radio, billboards, and online and calls coming into your office, you really want to measure each one. And our systems basically, and we recommend you have also internally, is a system that you actually set up your campaigns separately with the web API integrations and the phone numbers coming in, all tracked individually. So every single campaign, you can look at the conversion of each campaign and know for sure the best place to spend your marketing dollars and how to convert those the best way for your law firm. Those reports basically are very detailed, and they actually talk about the lead flow and everything else that comes in. So the other thing we can offer, and what we actually recommend for people, is understanding for outsourcing is that, now we deal with this a lot now, more than ever in the history of our company. People, when they're asked to evacuate due to hurricanes or floods or snowstorms, they can't get to work, or there's blackouts, people that we're handling after-hour calls just automatically send us emails and say, we're forwarding our calls to you all day long. So you've already generally spent the money on the marketing campaigns. The calls are coming into your office, but you're not there to respond to them. And any of these situations can keep you from getting to your office. But what can happen is your campaigns in your office can keep running with proper outsourcing. And we do this an awful lot. In fact, some of our busiest times we've had are some of the current hurricanes where, you know, hundreds of offices are being evacuated, their law firms, and they're sending their calls to us at once. So think about that as well. Now, the key thing for you is the bottom line really comes down to numbers. So let's say you have 100 leads that you've received for the month. And let's say just by having the proper outsource system, you increase your intake and you have an increase in conversion. And I think 5% is extremely conservative. We actually see those numbers, you know, to 4 to 5 times that amount. We see a lot of law firms losing a lot of leads. So let's just say it's only 5%. If the average fee per client was $12,000, I have $120,000 on there. That would be like the average fee for a mass tort. But let's say it was $12,000. that would basically equal $60,000 of more revenue on just the same 100 leads you always get, or $600,000 basically on 100 leads. But if it's 1,000 leads, look at the difference in the revenue by just increasing your performance 5%. Does intake? The intake is just this tiny portion of that. So you can see if you had $600,000 more in revenue and you spent the money on marketing, what you would have to pay for outsourced intake to actually reach that level is tiny. It's an automatic investment. If this was a Wall Street equation, people would be investing in this all the time to make sure they passed all the holes in their intake. So that's it. Outsourcing to the right partner makes sense. It'll actually drive more revenue to your firm. And the key to doing that basically is being ready. So the goal basically for you is to reach your full potential. Winston Churchill said, to improve is to change, to be perfect is to change often. And so keep in mind, the way this generally works is simple. A law firm calls us up. Often law firms basically are introduced to us by marketing firms that are looking to help them out to make sure they don't miss the leads they're generating for them. And what we do is go through an audit with them. We go through every single thing we can do, and we talk about what they're doing. It doesn't take long. It takes like 30 minutes to 45 minutes usually to go through everything. And we talk about all the things we can do to plug the holes they currently have. Generally, we get full agreement. They agree that those are the places that need to be helped. And we put together a system to actually help to make sure they miss no leads. And that frees the marketing up to do, they can spend more on marketing now. They have the bandwidth to handle more. They can invest more, and they can grow their firm more efficiently and in a wiser way. Also, when you're looking at an intake call center to help you out, there's some things you should be aware of. First of all, are they dedicated to legal? It is really difficult to be doing other types of product, taking calls for a plumbing house and then going to intake. We talked about that earlier. 7 years ago, we actually did all of this. We actually sold off all of that business. We're now 55,000 square feet and 400 people only doing legal, but we had to sell that off because there's just no way we could train to do empathy and psychology for the intake and what's required. Also, you should know if your call center is in the USA or if the calls are leaving the United States and going to accents that are not recognized as not recognized as United States, that are considered foreign, and if critical or sensitive information is leaving the country. So is your outsourced call center also outsourcing themselves to unknown entities and other call centers and even offshore? You should know. So that's a critical thing to know if they're farming out or if you're going offshore. And you should demand full disclosure in writing on this. This is where we are located. We are located in Camarillo, California, which is between Los Angeles and Santa Barbara in California. We have about 55,000 square foot, and everybody always asks us, where is are all your staff? Are any of them offshore? And the answer is nope. They are all under this roof, upstairs and downstairs in this building, and that's where we reside at this time. Just want to thank you for your time. If you'd like to go deeper and actually have this customized for your law firm, feel free to contact. This is my direct contact to set up a meeting, and we can help answer more questions for you. We try to make this as peaceful and as soft as possible as we kind of go through this, and we also customize everything for everybody. You should know with customized intakes, we do the customized intakes and screening criteria. It's not canned. It's designed specifically for every law firm, the way they want it and what we both achieve to make the most efficient to close the most amount of clients. And so we can help you do the same. Contact us anytime for a free consultation. And we thank you for joining our webinar today. We hope you have all day. And it doesn't look like there's any questions. If there are any questions, this would be a good time to write them, and you can put them in the chat group, and I'd be happy to answer them for you. So I just got a message in how do you deal with onboarding. The way we deal with onboarding is the first thing we do is kind of go walk through with you on with the law firm and the marketing firm sometimes, but a lot of times the law firm about what they really want, what their needs are, and we kind of agree on what those are after we go through the audit. And then after they actually sign an agreement with us, we go into our onboarding. We have an account manager that's going to be assigned to the law firm that's going to take care of that law firm. and the programmers on the call. And the reason why is that those meetings can be fairly technical about how to integrate with their phones, how to actually transfer calls, web leads, chat leads, how all those integrations work, times of day, the campaigns, do they have multiple different landing pages and advertising sources, do they have multiple different phone numbers, and during that meeting we basically go through all of those details. After we're done with those details and we agree on how to do the setup, we'll then type up an overview and we'll email that back out to the law firm and say, can you please approve that we're going to set up the account this way for you? Sometimes there's changes right there, or they want another meeting, but after we actually sync that up, then we go into our setup and programming, and we go through a time period of going back and forth, and we test all of the different sources for the leads and how they're coming through to make sure everything is working. And when everybody agrees, we do agreed upon time for starting. And once we agree with the law firm on the time we're going to do that, all the calls, transfer leads, everything are transferred to us, and we go live and we launch and we start handling the leads for you and responding and giving you reports on all of it. And that's how that works. But that's a good question. Any other questions? All right. Well, thank you everybody for joining this webinar on how to outsource for success to your legal intake. If we can help you with anything else, please give us a contact and we'll be happy to help you out. We appreciate your time.